So let's go ahead and start with the war in Ukraine. It looks like the war is finally going to come to an end. I'm telling you guys, this is great news for everybody. 14,000 civilian deaths, 40,000 civilians wounded. And when you talk about everybody as a whole, we're talking about over 400,000 people dead, billions in destruction. But it looks like it's finally going to come to an end. Listen to this.
Learning from a U.S. official that Ukraine has agreed to a peace proposal to end the war with Russia, saying that only, quote, minor details are outstanding now. The word from Ukraine's President Zelensky is much work still lies ahead. The country's national security chief, though, says its delegation has reached an understanding on the core terms of the deal. And there's also word that Zelensky could travel to the United States this month to sign it. But what about Vladimir Putin? Today, U.S. and Russian officials are meeting in Abu Dhabi to discuss the plan. A spokesman for the U.S. Army Secretary, who's leading the delegation, says that those talks are going well and we remain optimistic.
Now, President Trump is seizing on that momentum. He's sending Steve Witkoff to talk to Vladimir Putin. The reason President Trump isn't getting involved is because he's already gotten involved. Remember, he sat one-on-one with Putin. He sat one-on-one with Zelensky. They didn't want to meet together. And it seems like at times this whole thing was going to come to an end and everything eventually collapsed. So I think he's waiting to see something concrete, something solid, and I think then he's going to get involved. But let's listen to what President Trump had to say about the whole situation.
So I think we're getting very close to a deal. We'll find out.
His comments came after U.S. Army Secretary Dan Driscoll met earlier with Russian officials for several hours in Abu Dhabi to discuss the emerging proposal. As the talks were taking place, Russia launched a wave of overnight attacks on Ukraine's capital, killing at least 7 people. And a Ukrainian attack on southern Russia killed 3 people and damaged homes.
Unfortunately, these attacks are just going to continue and they're going to get worse as Russia looks to put more pressure on Ukraine to sign that deal pretty quickly. Let me tell you, as a negotiation, mediation, and peace specialist, I can tell you that there's always going to be a loser. And usually the loser is the smaller of the two. It's the weaker entity within the negotiating table. And in this case, it's Ukraine. So let's listen to some of the cons of this plan.
Good morning, Vlad. Look, the Ukrainians desperately want peace. They have ever since Vladimir Putin invaded their country. But both Ukraine and other European countries fear that recognizing occupied Ukrainian territory as Russian territory, which President Trump's peace plan says should happen de facto, is effectively rewarding Vladimir Putin for his invasion of Ukraine, an invasion that's cost hundreds of thousands of lives. They fear it will encourage Putin to invade again in future, either Ukraine or perhaps other parts of Europe. Now, the plan also says that Ukraine will never join NATO, an alliance that could have protected Ukraine from future attack. Ukraine very much wants to join that US-led alliance, but President Trump says it cannot happen. Instead, the president's plan talks about so-called security guarantees for Ukraine, some kind of international commitment that would theoretically deter Vladimir Putin from invading yet again.
Like I said before the clip, there's always going to be a loser when you negotiate these things in the international community. Unfortunately, the loser is going to be Ukraine on this one. Russia is going to get a lot of what they want, not everything, but they're going to get a lot of what they want. This is why we need to project power abroad. Now, in this situation, the European Union, the Europeans should have been projecting power because it's in their own backyard. And I know a lot of people are against President Trump when it comes to taking action against Venezuela, but this is the reason why we want to project power in our own backyard. This is the danger of not doing so. So power projection is important, but it doesn't matter what we do as a country. The Democrats are always going to oppose President Trump without putting forth any solutions. Here's Senator Kelly and his rebuttal of the current plan.
That is a very good deal for Russia. It is a horrible deal for Ukraine, for our allies, and even for our own national security.
And I think this reflects the unfortunate situation of the Democrat Party right now. They are against everything President Trump does, but offer no solutions. Remember, their solution for the last 4 years is continue to funnel money into Ukraine. Let them keep fighting, let the Ukrainians keep dying, and then let them figure it out. That it doesn't work like that. There has to be some type of negotiation, mediation, or peace talk or agreement in order for this war to end. To the Democrats, that's their solution. Let's continue doing that and hope it all works out. So let me highlight some of the positives that are going to take place after this whole peace deal is made. First of all, out of the $100 billion that are currently frozen for Russian assets, Ukraine is going to get $50 billion of that. Another $100 billion in investments from Europe. Russia is also going to enshrine into law non-aggression against Europe or Ukraine. And like I said before, this is going to be a little bit lopsided. So there are going to be limitations placed on Ukraine's military. They're not going to be able to exceed 600,000, and they're going to have to cede certain territory to Russia. And that's just the reality of it. Now, if you guys want to see what the whole 28-point plan includes, I've included it in the description below. And now let's move on to our next story, which is Venezuela. I think we are doing a terrible job. President Trump and his administration are doing a terrible job of explaining to the people exactly why we need to be there and why regime change is important for the United States. Listen to Will Cain talk about that right here.
I think it's very fair for the American public to think, why is this important to America? That's not to reject the idea that it is important, and it's certainly not a defense of Venezuela. But when we're talking about marshaling American forces, American money, potentially danger to Americans, why is it important for us to change Venezuela?
Well, I think that this cuts to the heart of President Trump's agenda in Latin America. The priorities, as I see it, are threefold. First, migration. Second, drugs. And third, China, and to a lesser extent, Russia. In Venezuela, you have all three of those issues present, and all three of those issues present in a major way. I think that's why the focus has been so intently on Maduro, the opportunities that he provides for China and Russia to project power just 600 miles from the U.S. homeland, the regime's participation in drug trafficking, which kills Americans, and the 8 million Venezuelans who have left that country because of ruinous economic policies. I think this hits on all of the issues that the president cares so much about, and why he, frankly, is refocusing U.S. foreign policy on the Americas, because it matters to everyday Americans what happens in our shared neighborhood.
Look, I think Will Cain is absolutely right. I think there are a lot of Americans that don't even know who Maduro is, and I think we need to do a better job of explaining it to them. Take a look at where Americans currently sit on this situation right now.
A new CBS News poll found most people want a better explanation of why the U.S. should take action in Venezuela. And if they don't get it, almost 3 out of every 4 people surveyed said they would oppose military intervention.
And I know when people look at polls, they say, well, who's voting here? Is it just Democrats? You know, they're probably people who oppose the president. But take a look at this chart right here. 97% of Democrats say that they need more information when it comes to Venezuela, and that is understood. But at the same time, 64% of Republicans say that they also need more explanation. And look at the independents. 86% of independents say that they need more information when it comes to Venezuela and the actions that we're taking there. So once again, I'll reiterate, I think we need to do a better job of explaining to Americans why we need to take action in Venezuela. That's the great thing about watching this channel. Now you're going to get a little bit more information on why we need to be there. Listen to this.
So starting at midnight tonight, Nicolas Maduro and his gang is officially a terrorist organization, and he is the head of a terrorist organization, which according to our United States laws puts him right in the crosshairs. We can take him out, we can extradite him, or we can go in and try to finish his regime. So good news for the Venezuelans who have been waiting for years to be liberated.
And now she made a couple of great points about what the president can now do against Maduro. So that's very important for Americans to know. So when others start talking about the legality of the strikes and everything that he's doing, now they understand that since they are labeled a terrorist organization and Maduro is considered the head of that terrorist organization, the president has a lot more authority to do whatever he needs to do to ensure that Maduro is taken out. Now, here are 3 additional reasons why we need regime change in Venezuela and why it's important to the United States.
Venezuela, for those Americans who do not understand why we need to go in, basically for 3 reasons. You're in Fox Business. Venezuela, for the American oil companies, will be a field day, because it will be more than $1 trillion in economic activity. American companies can go in and fix all the oil pipe, the whole oil rigs, and everything that has to do with the Venezuelan petroleum companies, or everything that has to do with oil and the derivatives. Number 2, Venezuela has been the launching pad, the hub for our enemies, the Iranian, Hezbollah, Hamas, the Cubans, the Nicaraguans, people that hate the United States, and the only thing they want to do is do harm to us and to our young Americans. And number 3, he is the head of the Sons Cartel, which is one of the transnational criminal organizations. In 2020, Nicolas Maduro was indicted by a federal grand jury for drug trafficking, and he is the head of the Sons Cartel.
So there you are, 3 points: the economy, security, and politically speaking. Now, there are a lot of people that are saying, well, Venezuela is going to turn into a failed state. It is a failed state already, but it's going to get even worse. There's going to be a coup. I'm telling you right now, there was an overwhelming election result last year. Over 70% of Venezuelans voted to change, to get Maduro out of there. So I don't think that's going to be an issue. I think once this happens, Maria Corina Machado is going to have a plan, which she has. She has a 100-day plan, and they're going to take over everything, and they're going to start restructuring the country. And eventually, like I've said before, Venezuela is going to be one of the richest countries in the world. And I've never shied away from saying that there is an economic interest for the United States of America in Venezuela when it comes to the oil. President Trump will not be doing anything that he's doing right now unless there was an economic gain for the United States of America. Remember, he is a transactional president. One of the first things I'm sure he asks is, okay, what's in it for America? And rightfully so. His responsibility is to ensure that we are a prosperous nation. Another thing the United States is considering doing is dropping leaflets as well all over the country to let them know that change is eventually going to happen. What those leaflets are going to say, we don't know yet. But I think that's also a good information operation to take place within the country to let the people know what's going on.
The United States is ramping up pressure on Venezuela. The Trump administration is discussing the possibility of dropping leaflets on Venezuela's capital city of Caracas, denouncing the Maduro regime. This follows a recent series of deadly strikes on those suspected drug boats in the Caribbean and the Eastern Pacific.
Now, I know there are still a lot of Americans that are saying, well, you know what, we don't want to get into this prolonged war. It's not going to happen. It's not going to be a prolonged war. I think it's going to be a proxy war against Venezuela. We're going to use the opposition to do what it is that they need to do in order to affect regime change. Now, a lot of you are wondering, what type of assets do we have there? How powerful are the assets that we have off the coast of Venezuela right now? Just take a look at some of these assets.
We should talk about what the White House has deployed.
Yeah, it's the biggest deployment in terms of the USS Gerald R. Ford aircraft carrier, which arrived in the Caribbean earlier this month. Let's take a look at what its capability is, because it is astronomical. It's the largest carrier in the world, displacing around 100,000 tons of water, fully laden. It's got the capability to hold more than 4,000 personnel on board and 25 decks. Now, that's decks going from the very depths of the aircraft all the way up to the deck and onwards from the where the air operations are conducted. It's got a speed of around 30 knots, and amazingly, it costs them $8 million a day to run. So it can operate up to around 90 aircraft, which equates to around 220 airstrikes per day. That's significant, and it can operate for 20 years without refueling. So in short, it's like parking a small country in your backyard.
And as we continue to build our forces around Venezuela, Maduro continues to get even more and more desperate. The last thing he did was he held a big rally around Venezuela pleading for peace. Take a look at this. You know, I think Maduro tries to do these rallies to try to make himself look stronger, and I think it just makes him look weaker. We had an opportunity during this rally to take a look at the military personnel that Venezuela currently has. Take a look at this. They don't look like they are too concerned. Once we start striking the country, I think these people are going to run. And if you don't think that's the case, you have no understanding of what American firepower can actually do. And in case you need to see that for yourself, I'm going to play you guys a little bit of a clip from the 250th Marine Corps birthday. This is the Commandant's message to all Marines. This video perfectly shows you what type of firepower is going to be coming into Venezuela if that were the case, and what type of military Venezuela is going to face in the United States Marine Corps, the greatest warfighting organization in the world.
50 years, we have formed ranks and held the line.
Now, as great as that looks, I don't think we're going to engage in any type of ground combat operation. I think the opposition is going to do that for us. We're going to do surgical strikes throughout the country and then let them do their job. And now let's move on to our next story, which is the Secretary of War threatening legal action against Senator Kelly for taking part in that video where he and several other politicians were instructing troops to disobey orders. Listen to this.
Consequences could be coming for those reckless Senate Democrats who posted a video urging our American military to defy, quote, illegal orders, even though they couldn't name a single one. The Pentagon now is probing serious allegations of misconduct into Democratic Senator Mark Kelly, with Secretary of War Pete Hegseth saying he's considering recalling Kelly to active duty for possible court-martial, noting that Kelly's conduct, quote, brings discredit upon the armed forces and will be addressed appropriately.
Now, in all honesty, I don't think this is going to go anywhere, but listen to Senator Kelly respond.
And so in terms of Senator Kelly, he's now responding. What is he saying?
Well, he is pretty defiant, and he does not seem deterred by this. In a statement on X that was very lengthy, detailing his very extensive military service and career, he said, quote, "If this is meant to intimidate me and other members of Congress from doing our jobs and holding this administration accountable, it won't work. I've given too much to this country to be silenced by bullies who care more about their own power than protecting the Constitution." Now,
like I said before, let's be honest here. A sitting senator is not going to be recalled back to active duty to get court-martialed. I think he did enough damage to himself just by posting that video. But Democrats continue to defend the video. They think there was absolutely nothing wrong with the video. Now, here's Senator Gallego talking about that and how frustrated he is about the whole story pertaining to the Secretary of War seeking legal action against Senator Kelly.
This is insane. We should all point out how insane this is. And, you know, these guys are trying to say that they're not acting like fascists. Secretary Hegseth, all these guys, you guys, you're not gonna be able to scare us.
Now, he sounds very tough, but listen to what he says when he's asked why he didn't participate in the video.
Did you consider, why were you not part of this video?
Yeah, actually, so I was part of the first video. The second video is by the time the script got to me and it was in the middle of a lot was going on, I just didn't have time to actually record it, but I'm 100% in alignment with them altogether. This stuff happens, you know, it just happened not to end up being a recording. There's really no other 3D chess to this.
The logistics of human life.
I was too busy to participate in the video, or you understood exactly what the fallout was going to be and you chose not to participate in the video. I think it's the latter. I think this whole video was uncalled for, and I think they're playing to the ignorance of the American people. And now let's move on to our next story. The case against James Comey and Letitia James has just been dropped. Take a listen to this.
Big, we have learned that the Justice Department's case against former FBI Director Jim Comey and the New York Attorney General have both been dismissed. CNN's Caitlin Polance is covering this. Caitlin, okay, what happened here? I don't know which case you want to take first.
Well, they both are being dismissed, and for essentially the same reason that Lindsay Halligan, the Eastern District of Virginia interim U.S. attorney sent there by Donald Trump, not Senate confirmed, that she doesn't have the power.
So in other words, this case was dropped on a technicality. Now, the judge did say that this was without prejudice, meaning that they can appeal and this case can be brought back. So you can expect Pam Bondi to bring this case back as soon as possible. And for those of you wondering the legal aspect and if there's going to be enough merit to the case in order to prosecute them or to bring it forth to a jury later on, take a listen to this legal analysis.
How can the DOJ fix this?
Well, thanks, Todd, and good morning. Look, we're looking at a situation where you have 28 United States Code Section 546 that applies in this situation, and the language is clear. The U.S. Attorney under Section, or the Attorney General under Section A can appoint a U.S. Attorney, as Pam Bondi did, and with Lindsay Halligan, and the district court is trying to argue this very vague language under Section D of the 28 United States Code that the district court should have appointed a judge rather than Pam Bondi, but it's vague. It says the district court may appoint a U.S. attorney in the absence of, the attorney general doing so. Todd, this judge is Judge Curry. A Clinton judge is trying to run the clock on statute of limitations, protect Comey and James, and I think Pam Bondi will succeed on appeal.
So essentially, James Comey and Letitia James are in trouble. Listen, I know that people are out there saying, well, this is a witch hunt. This is President Trump targeting these two. First of all, if they didn't do anything wrong, then they should have nothing to worry about. Initially, we understood that James Comey created a bunch of false narratives in order to attack President Trump. We also understood that Letitia James ran on the fact that she stated that she was going to go after President Trump. Now, the part that's crazy about all of this is that Letitia James is being charged with the same things that she went after President Trump for. You cannot go after the most powerful man in the world and not expect retribution. I think what Letitia James and James Comey need to do is rely on the same justice system that they relied on to charge President Trump. But if they believe in the justice system, let it run its course. If James Comey has nothing to hide, there's nothing to hide. If Letitia James has nothing to hide, there's nothing to hide. Provide the evidence that you're innocent and you will be proven innocent. I want to take this opportunity to thank you guys for watching. Almost 60,000 views in just 3 weeks. I really appreciate the support. I'm going to continue making content that keeps you informed on what's going on, not just here, but around the world. Like, share, and subscribe. And until next time, stay balanced.